authoritarian, totalitarian, and increasingly,
Erdogan is becoming a Turkish dictator.
You remember how President Erdogan was asking people to vote democratically to make him a dictator?
But it wasn't always this way. Toward the beginning of his time in political leadership, he was known for more progressive reforms like bolstering freedom of the press, revamping the national currency, and promising to spearhead Turkey's membership into the European Union. But in recent years, Erdogan has aggressively and at times violently doubled down on aggregating as much power as he can, as well as what his critics argue has been his goal all along, building a new religious Turkey from the ashes of its secular past. Erdogan's religious roots date back to his upbringing. Born on February 26, 1954, to a devout Muslim working-class family, he attended a religious school designed to train imams. Imam Hatip schools were created under Turkey's first president and founder, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, in 1923, after he abolished Islamic schools, or madrasas, to secure government control over religious schooling. Erdogan has previously spoken about the discrimination he felt attending one of these schools amid a secular society. That feeling stayed with him. At university, Erdogan was mentored by Necmettin Erbakan, who would go on to become the country's first Islamist prime minister. He joined the youth movement of Erbakan's party, National Salvation, which would later rebrand as the Welfare Party, aspiring to reintegrate elements of religion and spirituality in a deeply secular Turkish society. That secularism was a result of Ataturk's rule, who created modern Turkey from the ruins of the Ottoman Empire. And although Ataturk initially implemented progressive reforms, his firm belief in separation of church and state led to the banning of religious-based clothing like the hijab, mosques were put under state control, and Islam was removed from the constitution as the state religion. This caused some of the country's majority Muslim population to feel isolated. Ataturk died in 1938, and a series of military coups from 1960 to 1997 followed. The military acted as protectors of the legacy of the father of modern Turkey, especially when it came to secularism. The military intervened under the guise of restoring order several times, and the country saw several periods of military rule, violent clashes between parties, as well as executions and brutal arrests. Decades of political chaos left the economy weak and faith in government even weaker. Meanwhile, in 1994, Erdogan was elected mayor of Istanbul. Many scholars and journalists alike refer to him as the first Islamist mayor of Turkey. And he was pretty popular, blending transparent and open leadership with the implementation of religious policies. He cleaned up the streets, restored fresh water supplies, and even reportedly created an open-door policy at City Hall, giving out his personal email address. He didn't quite advocate to overhaul the entire secular system, but he did refer to himself as the Imam of Istanbul, promised to build a mosque in the city center, and ban alcohol from government buildings. But he painted this steady move away from secularism as something driven by the people, rather than his own beliefs.
Bu millet istedikten sonra tabii elden gidecek ya. Yani sen bunun önüne geçemezsin ki. Yani zorla bu milletin elinde tutmaya gücün yetmez.
Then in 1997, he pushed the envelope a bit too far for the military. At a rally, he read a religious poem, which got him arrested for allegedly inciting hatred. He was sentenced to 10 months in jail, of which he served 4. And some argue that his stint behind bars made him even more popular with his supporters, and even his critics. Thousands protested the sentencing, which included Erdogan being barred for life from public office. That didn't last long. After being released from jail, Erdogan co-founded the party that he continues to lead today, the Justice and Development Party, also known as the AK Party. Likely having learned lessons from his jail time and the ousting of his former mentor, Erdogan loosened up a bit. He moved away from anti-Western tendencies and advocated for Turkey's admission to the EU. In 2002, the AK Party won a sweeping majority in parliament, the first single-party majority in 15 years, and soon after, Parliament reversed Erdogan's lifetime ban in political office. He was appointed prime minister in March 2003 and reportedly promised not to interfere with anyone's way of life. The country was seemingly on a path to democracy. He enacted political reforms like reducing the military's power over government. The EU even extended an offer to begin negotiations for membership in 2004, on the condition that specific political reforms were met. Economic reforms resulted in a booming GDP. But some experts say it was nothing more than a facade. Things started to change in 2007, when the military made a public statement promising to protect Turkey's secularism and expressing opposition to the beliefs of presidential candidate and AK Party co-founder Abdullah Gül. Erdogan responded to this challenge to his authority with a call for early elections, confident his party would prevail. And they did. The party won 2 consecutive national election victories in 2007 and 2011. Another threat to Erdogan's power came in 2013 when his government was being investigated for corruption. A few of Erdogan's confidants and top ministers had to resign, and on their way out, some called for him to resign also. The corruption investigation involved officials accused of taking millions of dollars in bribes to approve unregulated construction projects, which Erdogan denounced as an effort to delegitimize his government, blaming a religious leader he'd previously been aligned with, Fethullah Gulen. Erdogan overhauled the judiciary, reassigning more than 100 judges and prosecutors, many of whom were Gulen's supporters, and tightened his grip over the military. Around this time, protesters started organizing, calling on Erdogan to resign and calling attention to alleged bribery. The government cracked down on dissent, jailing protesters, people who criticized Erdogan on social media, and journalists. Then in August 2014, in an effort to further consolidate his power, Erdogan moved from prime minister to president of Turkey. Historically, the role of president had been mostly ceremonial, but Erdogan essentially absorbed the power of the prime minister's position into his new office as well. He started using religion as a means to implement his conservative policies, declaring that Islam defines a woman's primary role as a mother, and that women and men can't be treated equally because it goes against, quote, the laws of nature. He restricted alcohol and abortions and started closing private schools, converting some into religious Imam Khatib institutions or building new ones entirely. Then in 2016, tensions culminated in a failed coup attempt to overthrow Erdogan. The night became a bloodbath, with 241 people killed and over 2,000 others injured. Erdogan sent a mass text asking ordinary citizens to band together with the military and fight the coup. With the help of tanks and Turkish fighter jets, they overcame the opposition. He was merciless in his attempt to hold those who challenged his authority accountable. Erdogan blamed the coup on Gulen, saying it was his attempt to build his own dictatorship, and arrested tens of thousands of people suspected of being linked to the Muslim cleric. And in 2017, he took the power grab even further, narrowly winning a referendum that created an executive presidency, dispensed with the role of prime minister, and could provide a path for him to rule until 2029. But human rights groups argue that these elections haven't been free nor fair. So where does this leave us now? April 2018, Erdogan called for snap parliamentary and presidential elections in June, a whopping 18 months early. Why? According to critics, because he thinks he has a way better shot at winning. And Erdogan has promised to end the state of emergency, imposed on the country in 2016 after the coup attempt, if he does take home the victory.